Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ananda Priyanti. I'm from English Education Department, Class A 2018. Today I'm going to tell you about my lesson plan. The first is the name of teacher, Ananda Priyanti SPD, and then name of school, SMP N7 Banjarmasin. The subject is English. In grade 8, topic we know what to do in chapter 3. The text type is transactional text. The skill are listening and speaking. Time allocation is 1 times 15 minutes. For core competence, I think I don't have to explain about it because the core competence is fixed from our governments. And then basic competence and indicator of competent achievement. For basic competence, is taken from our government draft. Basic competence is 3.3 and 4.3. For indicator of competent achievement is 3.3.1 to identify and 3.3.2 to introduce, and then 4.3.1 to using expressions, and then 4.3.2 to present. Next, learning objective. In the end of the class, the student will be able to identify the structure of transactional text suggestions that have been prepared in a good grammar and meaningful way. And then the students will be able to mention the expression of their transactional text about suggestion in front of the class. Next, the students will be able to have the requirement, prohibitions, and directive to implement the communicative function of transactional text about suggestions. For attitude values focus on religious, discipline, integrity, and mutual cooperation. And then learning materials. For the learning materials about suggestions, the first is facts, starting, responding, and then concept, social function of suggestions, to ask and give suggestions to someone and give responses to the suggestions, whether accepting or refusing it, and then to help someone who needs any suggestions or advice by giving our personal idea and opinion in our daily life. And then the principle, that is generic structure, purpose, expressions, asking, giving, responding to suggestions, using must, should. You should ask question in English. Next, learning materials for remedial. Transactional text about suggestion according to the needs of their use. And then learning materials for enrichment, social function, generic structure, and language features, and transactional text of suggestions but listening and oral. For the learning method, the first is approach, scientific approach. For the learning model, CLT, communicative language teaching. Next, learning media. The first is in focus LCD projector, picture, laptop, and textbook. Next, teaching and learning activity for 1 time 15 minutes. The first is opening activity. In the opening activity, there is orientation, perceptions, motivation, and giving reference. Next, main activity. For the first literation activities, stimulations. Students are given motivation or stimulations to focus attention on the topic by doing some ways: viewing, observing, reading, listening, and for viewing, display relevant pictures or photos or videos. For observing, give some clue about the materials which is about to be learned through some questions based on her conditions. For example, I think the class is quite cold. How about turn off the air conditioner? For reading, in their own home before the teaching learning activities, students are asked to read material from textbook or other supporting books from the internet or related materials about transactional text in form of suggestions. For the listening, students are asked to listen to the material given by the teacher which is related to transactional text in form of suggestions on chapter 3, page 34. Next, critical thinking about problem statement, question, or problem identifications. The teacher gives students the opportunity to identify as many questions as possible related to the picture presented and will be answered through learning activities. For example, asking the questions about what is suggestions, what is the purpose of suggestions, how for making a good sentence about suggestions, which is not understood from what it observed, or questions to get additional information about what is observed. To develop creativity, curiosity, the ability to formulate questions to form critical. For example, the meaning of suggestions is the function and the step for making the sentence about suggestions are like that. Next, collaborations and critical thinking about data collections. Students gather relevant information to answer the questions that have been identified through the activity. So the first is observing the object or phenomena, and then interviewing the informants, and then collecting the informations, reading other sources beside textbook. For example, students are asked to explore their knowledge by reading reference books about how to make structured sentence about suggestion that is good sentence. And then representing and then activities. For example, learners do the following activities. The students work in pairs to complete the worksheet has some missing parts of expressing of suggestion with its response. And then the students discuss and practice it with other friends. Next, discussing and then reviewing and then exchange information about how to make a simple conversation about suggestions. Next, critical thinking about data processing. Students in their group discuss processing the observational data in a way. For the first is discussing about the data. For example, how to identify structure of transactional text about suggestions, how to describe transactional text about suggestions according to the structure, how to make a simple conversation about suggestions, and then processing informations that has been collected from the result of previous activities, and then students doing the performance in making a simple conversation suggestions. Next, critical thinking about verifications. Learners discuss the results of their observations and verify the results of their observation with data or theory in the search book through activities. For example, present in front of the class about problem they have where it will be searched to ask for the suggestions. Next, communications about generalizations. Students are discussing to summarize. The first is deliver the results of discussion in the form of conclusions, and then present the results of the classical group discussions about asking for giving and responding to suggestions, and then express opinions on presentations made and responded to by the group presenting, and then ask about the presentations, and other students are given the opportunity to answer them, and then summarize the important points about asking for giving and responding the suggestions, and then answering questions contained in the student's handbook or worksheets that have been provided, and then ask questions about things that are not understood, or the teacher throws a few questions to students, and then complete the competency test contained in the student's handbook or on the worksheet, that has been provided individually to check students' mastery of the subject matter. Next, closing activity for the students are making summary with the guidance of the teacher about the important points that emerge in the new learning activities carried out, and then scheduling homework, and then scheduling project that must be studied at the next meeting outside school hours or at home. And then for the teacher are checking student work completed immediately. Students who have completed the project correctly and entail it and given a ranking number for the project assessment. And then give award to groups that have good performance and collaborations. Next, assessment, remedial, and enrichments. For the first is assessment technique. There is affective, spiritual, and social. Assessed behavior aspect are religious, discipline, integrity, and mutual cooperation. For cognitive, focus the speaking test and physicomotor performance. From this learning process, the students are able to speak and the transactional text applications. Next is rubric. For the first is aspect listening assessments that are comprehensions, listening, participate willingly, thinks about characters, follows along, and remembering in full. For the aspects of speaking assessments that are fluency. For the aspect of speaking assessment that are fluency, pronunciations, accuracy, and expressions. Next is rubric. For the first is aspect listening assessments that are comprehensions, listening, participate willingly, thinks about characters, follows along, and remembering in full. For the aspects of speaking assessments that are fluency. For the aspect of speaking assessment that are fluency, pronunciations, accuracy, and expressions. Okay, I think that's all from my presentation about my lesson plans. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.